Listeners, have you ever come to a point in your life where giving up was the way forward? What did it take to surrender? And how was this type of surrender different from giving up? I'm going to tell you, this is a super deep issue for me because I've both wrestled with what surrender is and have found that the times when I was actually able to surrender, huge changes happened in my life that created greater flow. So I was so excited when Aiden Chase asked me to expand on some of the things I've shared related to surrender in my recent episodes. So, Aiden, this episode is for you. And if you weren't privy to that conversation, here are a few of the things that I am going to explore today. We're going to talk about what I really mean by surrender, how you can practice big and little surrenders in your life, and how to surrender without losing your sovereignty and your power. All right, let's get started. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Cooper Ellison, your resident story alchemist and the host of this show. Every week, we explore the ways you can write and live the story that sets you free. And I'm so grateful to be here with you today as we talk about a very powerful topic, and that topic is surrender. And we're going to look at how you can use surrender to live more authentically and with greater sovereignty. But to begin, let's talk about what this word means and, more importantly, how you feel about it. So let's do this exercise together. If you are driving or walking down the street or using heavy machinery, do not close your eyes. Just be with the exercise in another way. But if you can, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to say the word surrender to yourself. You can say it in your head, or you can say it out loud, or you can write it down. As you say this word a few times, I want you to notice what images pop into your head. What emotions do you feel when you say this word? Or what emotions are tied to it? And what happens in your body when you continue to say this word? I'm going to be honest. For a long time, surrender was my frenemy. It was a really hard word for me, both because of the dictionary definition of surrender and how I'd seen surrender used in various relationships and in religion. If you're not familiar with the dictionary definition, it's to cease resistance to an enemy or to submit to authority. And it was that submission part that was something I resisted. And I do. I resist the idea that I have to submit to anyone. And that is because I am a Sagittarius rising and we do not like to be trapped or boxed in. We will not let that happen. So for a long time, I resisted that idea that I had to give up who I was in order to surrender. And, that happened to me when I was a kid. I saw people and I experienced this in my own life where people had a strong will and they wanted you to submit to their will, which often meant divorcing myself from my feelings, from my thoughts, and from who I authentically am and what I authentically want to do. So I don't want you to do that because that is actually unhealthy behavior. I want you to make choices to surrender in a way that feels right for you. And if the word surrender feels triggering because maybe you've had religious trauma or you've encountered it in another way that feels damaging, here are a few other words that you can use to help yourself with the concept. You can say accepting life on life's terms, choosing ease, and letting go. See which one works for you and use that. I personally am going to stick with the word surrender because even though I have a complicated relationship with it, when I personally say the word surrender, I notice that my shoulders roll down, I exhale a little, and I feel a sense of ease in my body. And that is probably because I have been working with this word for 25 years now, right? I probably didn't feel that before, but I've developed my own definition and my own practices in a way that the word works for me. But you choose what works for you. All right. So I've talked a little bit about my resistance to surrender or why some people do resist this word, but let's talk about how you can surrender in a way that is healthy and helps you claim your sovereignty rather than giving it away. So, healthy surrender accepts life on life's terms. It accepts other people's limitations, it sets boundaries, and it does what is needed to keep you safe. So, here are a couple of examples of what that might look like in relationships. Let's say that you have a parent who is invalidating. No matter what you tell that person, they are going to put you down in some way. If you share your achievements, they're going to tell you it's not good enough. Well, accepting life on life's terms is recognizing that that is how that person behaves, that is what they do, and that they're not going to be able to give you what you need, which is probably to have someone celebrate you and celebrate alongside you all of the accomplishments that you have, and you deserve that. So when you are surrendering to that situation, you're saying, if I continue to operate in this way, I'm going to get hurt. And I accept that. Therefore, I will not share things with that person. I will, however, get my needs met, right? This is the healthy part. It's not just saying, like, I'm not going to engage in that. It's saying, I will get my needs met in another way. And that might mean finding people who have that parent energy for you in your life and sharing your victories and sharing your accomplishments with them so that they can celebrate you and honor what you have done. Maybe you have another person in your life who acts in a volatile way. So maybe Uncle Joe goes to Thanksgiving every year, has 4 or 5 drinks, and then starts shouting at everyone. Accepting life on life's terms and surrendering is saying, once he starts drinking, the belligerence is going to happen. And I accept that this is the pattern that happens in my family. I surrender to that understanding and I will make a decision that works for me in terms of whether or not I want to be around that, right? So you can surrender and then take action to help protect yourself. That's what I mean by healthy surrender. As I said earlier, unhealthy surrender is where you divorce yourself from your feelings, you stop caring for yourself, or you allow others to harm you in any way. I want you to let go of that as much as you possibly can and keep letting go of it throughout your life. Because as we know, it's a journey and sometimes we do these things well and sometimes we don't. But yeah, I had a really strong pattern in my own life of allowing people to treat me in unkind ways. And I knew that they behaved that way, right? I knew that this is what's going to happen, right? Maybe they're friendly and they're kind for a little bit, but then there's going to be an explosion. And I knew this, and I kept going into that relationship until the explosion happened. And then I felt bad and I was treated poorly. Well, I don't do that anymore because I've learned that part of surrendering is really accepting that that's just how things are. And one of the things that helped me with this so much was having the privilege of being in the audience of the Dalai Lama. So I was in an audience with the Dalai Lama in 2008. I saw him in Ithaca, New York. This was a lifelong dream. I had learned about the Dalai Lama when I was 17 years old. I knew someone who had seen him, and that was a dream of mine. I wanted to see him. So I was so excited while I was there in the audience, and I was in the 12th row. I was in the 12th row with the Dalai Lama. and I had my notebook out and I was just absorbing every single thing he said. And there were so many nuggets of wisdom in that conversation. However, the thing that stopped me in my tracks was a question that someone else asked. So the person asked the Dalai Lama, "What do you do when change isn't possible?" And the example that this person gave is the Chinese occupation of Tibet. Now, many people who are from Tibet, either who have left or who live there under Chinese occupation, would like to have sovereignty over their country. They would like to have the ability to continue with their traditions and their religion, things that are forbidden under Chinese rule. And so they really want this. And the Dalai Lama had to escape. And he almost lost his life in that escape. And he has lived in exile for over 50 years. So this was a big question for him, and I was very eager to hear what he had to say. And so the person asked this question, and the Dalai Lama pauses for a moment, and he swallows a few times. He looks at his feet, and then he looks up and he says, "The first thing that you need to do in any situation is to see if there's something that you can do. Is there something you can do to change it? And if there is, have the courage to take action." However, if no change can happen, the very best thing you can do is accept the situation and then work to not worry about it. Because when you worry about a situation that you can't change, you are caged to that situation. Okay, so I had to stop there for a moment because my first job was to figure out how to let go of something that I couldn't change, right? Learn how to accept life on life's terms. And then that second part was learn how to not worry about it. And I'll be honest, I am in the middle of that. I can't say that I have that mastered because I don't. But it is something that I try to focus on, and it is part of my surrender practice when I come against situations where change is not going to occur. And that doesn't mean that if you encounter something like this that you don't continue to wish for change. I'm sure that the Dalai Lama wishes that he could go back to Tibet. That's his homeland. I'm sure he wishes that. He accepts, though, that at this time that is not possible. And even though life is long and things could change, there is no change in sight. So he accepts what is and works to have deep compassion for himself and even for the Chinese communists who are occupying his country. Listeners, I'm pausing this episode for a moment because this is too good not to mention. If you've written a memoir or you're deep in the middle of the memoir writing process and something still isn't working, maybe the story feels scattered or sluggish, or you know the experiences you've had are powerful, but on the page, they're not landing the way you imagined. You're not alone. The gap between lived experience and compelling narrative arc is a structure problem most writers face. But here's the good news. Structure is something you can learn. My Jane Friedman webinar, Find and Refine Your Memoir's Narrative Arc, on April 29th, will give you the tools to understand the shape of your story, identify what's creating that sluggish feeling, and revise with real clarity. The registration link is in the show notes. This one is worth clearing your schedule for, and if you can't, fear not. Everyone will receive the recording, transcript, slides, and workbook. Okay, so I've talked about something that was really helpful to me when it comes to learning about surrender, but I want to talk about now the types of surrenders we may experience in our lives. And this is the reason why Aiden asked this question. So when I was talking with Tanya Ortega Gonzalez about family constellations therapy, we talked about these powerful moments of surrender that we had in our lives. And the way I talked about it and the way Tanya talked about it sounded like it was a spontaneous form of surrender. And I will say, in my experience, when I actually surrendered, it was spontaneous. It was like all of a sudden I realized it was what I had to do, and boop, I let go. And spontaneous surrender often happens because we have endured incredible pain. And often that pain has been there for a while. It could be that we've been carrying the burden of it for years, like boulders on our shoulders, or it could be that it's been this wave that kind of comes in and then gets stronger and stronger and stronger till it's a peak. And we know we have to do something different, right? But it's that pain that causes us to spontaneously let go and surrender. And in my case, the surrender was around having Lyme disease and my capacity to control whether or not I got well, right? By the time I surrendered, I had been sick for 4 years. I'd been sick for a really long time, and I had been in a miserable state. So I had extreme pain, I had depression, anxiety, all of these things happening to me, and yet I looked good. So on the outside, people questioned whether I was actually sick, even though my body was breaking down. And a part of me knew I could actually die like this. Like it was possible that I would not get well. And as I walked along this trail that I frequented when I would meditate, I looked at this red winged blackbird and I realized that I had to be okay with how things were. And I had to be okay even if I never got well. And in that moment, I surrendered. I surrendered to my experience and I became okay. And it was a huge relief for me. But these kinds of surrenders, I'll say fortunately, don't happen often in our lives, right? Thank goodness we don't end up in that level of pain all the time. And so we don't have the drama of that kind of surrender. But you can look across your life and see if there was a point where you did have that level of pain that led to a surrender. So look at that and then say, what did you do? What led to it? And how did that happen? And that might give you some information about what surrender actually is for you or how surrender has helped you grow. But those are the big things. And really, I will say in my case, the only reason I was able to do that was it wasn't just the pain. It was the fact that I had had these little surrender practices that I had done for 15 years. I had been practicing healthy surrender for 15 years. I'm going to share some of the practices that I do, and feel free to take them on or allow yourself to be inspired by something else that comes to mind in relation to your own surrender practice. So, one way that we can develop a surrender practice is to surrender to the present moment. And it's pretty easy to do. Number one, put your phone away. So, put your phone away and then be fully with the people that you're with or with the experience. So if you are, let's say, watching a sunset, watch the sunset. If you're watching the waves roll in, watch the waves roll in. If you're talking with someone, just be with that conversation. And one of the best ways to surrender to the present moment is to laugh. Because when you are in deep belly laughter, that is all there is. And think about a time when you had that deep belly laugh, how good your body felt when you were done, how light, how free. That is the power of positive surrender to the present moment. Another thing that you can do is you can develop a journaling or a meditation practice where you begin to notice the times when you want to control or when you're experiencing fear and you have a deep desire for certainty. Just begin to notice when those things are happening. That's the first part of this practice. You don't even have to do anything else. You just build that awareness like, oh, yeah, I want to control now. Oh, I really would like certainty. I would like to know the answer. And if you're a writer, a way you can practice this is that if you send work out for submission, you all know that it takes a while to find out the answer. Well, you can practice this while you send things out and you're waiting. So, first notice that. And then once you get a handle on that, or when you start experiencing that sense of control or need for certainty or that fear, you can say a mantra. And mantras are just a phrase or a word that you repeat. And when you repeat this, and you do it consistently, what it does is it takes that fear out of your brain and it begins to re regulate your nervous system. I've had a number of different mantras throughout the years. These are two that I work with regularly. For a long time, I worked with the Serenity Prayer. And if you're not familiar with it, it's grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Sounds a lot like what the Dalai Lama said, doesn't it? Well, I spent years just saying that and then thinking about, can it be changed and do I have the courage to do so? I just sat with that again and again. So that is a great prayer. If you are not Christian, you can still say it in your own way. Like, notice I happen to be Buddhist. I am not Christian, and I don't say God just because that doesn't resonate for me. You can add extra words. I give you permission to do so and to use it in whatever way you like. Another mantra that I say is from Tosha Silver's book, It's Not Your Money. There's a longer prayer, and I actually say the whole prayer every morning. But if I run into a place where I'm experiencing a lot of uncertainty or that sense of fear, or like, oh my gosh, am I going in the right direction? Do I even know what I'm doing? I will say this: let everything that needs to go, go. Let everything that needs to come, come. Just, I will say those two phrases again and again, and it opens me up to possibility. And that's so important because when we are stuck and we are trying to control a situation, we are contracting, right? Sometimes when we get that tunnel vision, we think we know what we want, but it may not be what we actually need. And so when we can surrender into open possibilities, allowing for what we may want to happen or something better, we allow for something great to come into our lives. And that is huge. So I'm going to give you a third mantra that I use. So the first two are great with situations, but if you have a person in your life that is tricky, right? And I will say this is what can be tricky for me. This was my kryptonite for a long time, is that I would see not just the best in someone, but I would see the potential that I hoped would happen. Maybe because I helped fix them, right? So, codependency, you are my co pilot. That was my co pilot for a long time. And, I had people in my life that were wounded, and I could see that ease and peace that they could possibly have if they only followed what I thought was best. Well, here's the thing: I don't know what's best for them, but also I'm not in charge of their change. They are. And what I have to do instead is listen to what people say and believe them. So the mantra that I use is, I believe you. So if someone tells me they don't want to change, or they're an angry person, or they need to have things in control, or whatever they say, in my head, I will be like, I believe you. I believe that this is your reality, and I accept that about you. And I can treat them with compassion, I can treat them with love, and I can decide whether or not that works with what I want or what aligns with who I am, right? So I don't have to be around angry people. So if someone tells me they're an angry person, I can say, I believe you. And then I can pause and say, do I want to bring that into my life? Right? That is a form of surrender. It's surrendering to the understanding of someone else's reality and then making a decision to do what's right for me. I'm surrendering to the fact that I might have to make a difficult decision, a decision that I don't want to make. And yet it might be for the very best for myself and for that person. So, what I hope that you hear over and over is that surrender isn't passive. Surrender isn't about just accepting what is and not having any boundaries around it. It is very boundaried. And that's how we have compassion for ourselves and for other people. And again, I've been doing this for a really long time. And here's what I can say: the more that I can surrender by accepting life on life's terms, by allowing people to be who they are and accepting that, and then deciding what I need, my life gets easier. Does this mean I have zero obstacles? No, it does not, because we live on earth and we will face obstacles, but I can allow those obstacles to be opportunities to grow. even when they hurt and even when they are things that I absolutely do not want to happen. Sometimes being in my sovereignty and being in compassion with myself and others, that form of surrender is recognizing that I have choices to make. And one of those choices is to allow someone their suffering because they get to make that choice, right? I may want something different for someone. I may be able to see strategies someone could use to grow in certain ways, but ultimately each person has to decide what they want and how they're going to go about it. And the reality is that I don't know what lessons they're here to learn. I don't know what's going on inside them, so I cannot make that decision. So, as we wrap up, I just want to say a few things. So, what we've talked about today is what surrender is and the difference between healthy and unhealthy surrender, and the fact that healthy surrender has boundaries and is about recognizing what is happening in the world, accepting it, and then taking action to care for yourself. Big surrenders are dramatic. We have them occasionally, or at least we have the opportunity to have them, but you can develop a surrender practice at any point in time. And practicing surrendering to little things, especially little pleasurable things, will allow you more ease and more grace if and when you come to those big surrender points in your life. I would love to hear from you on this topic if you have some ideas. So, if you have a different definition of surrender or you have strategies that you've used to deal with surrender in your own life that are different from anything that I shared, or you want to say, you know what, I do that too, please share your comments on YouTube. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Aiden Chase, for suggesting this topic. If you'd like to take this a little deeper, grab your notebook and a pen and try this prompt. I want you to think about a time when you were holding on. Could be to an outcome, a relationship, a version of yourself, or a belief about how things should be. What were you afraid would happen if you let go? Write about what it would mean to surrender to one thing right now, not in defeat, but in trust. What might be possible if you stopped resisting? You can make my day by sharing that insight, a question about this topic, or a topic you'd like me to consider, just like Aiden did. Just make sure you put them in the YouTube comments. And when you do, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would absolutely love to hear from you, and I would love to have you as part of this community. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.